I only found out after Billy gave me to his twin brother that he hadn't had feelings for me during our 3 years of marriage. He loved my sister, and I was just a family-pushed child for him. He wanted me to have kids with Calvin. Yet, when I appeared in front of him with the pregnancy test report, he got teary-eyed. Did you really fall in love with my brother? I stayed silent. The door behind me knocked, and a man's careless voice came in. For 3 years, Billy was abstinent and distant, never touching me. So, I took the initiative to sleep in separate rooms, keeping our distance. That was until his reckless twin brother, Calvin, came back from abroad. I accidentally overheard their conversation. Calvin, you replace me and consummate with Helen, Billy said in a detached tone, like he was mentioning a stranger. The next second, Calvin's lazy yet roguish voice rang out. You lost your mind with your chanting. She isn't my wife. Unless, could it be? He paused, mischief in his voice. You can't take care of it. Billy didn't get mad. He sat calmly on the mat, rolling a white jade Buddha bead between his fingers. I just have no feelings for someone I don't love, he said simply, pinning me right in place. Calvin's pen suddenly snapped in his hand. He picked it up casually, a smirk at the corner of his mouth. Is that so? If not her, then who do you love? Billy was silent for a moment. At that point, my heart sank, until he spoke again, naming someone all too familiar. Sherry, my cousin, once the nation's sweetheart, who left the spotlight 3 years ago to move abroad. Hearing her name dredged up old memories. Billy and I grew up knowing each other. In 8th grade, he got seriously ill and was sent to a monastery. We hadn't been in contact since. The next time I saw him was senior year of high school. He sent a letter through someone. An elegant, thin-stroked script inside the plain envelope read simply, bored in the temple. Those 4 words were like wildfire to me. Harboring a crush on him, thinking it hinted at wanting to see me. So as soon as break started, I packed my homework and headed to the monastery. Billy, dressed in white, was as cool and distant as ever when we met. His gaze looked over my shoulder. You came by yourself. Not noticing the disappointment in his eyes, I pulled out the letter. Didn't you write to me alone? Billy looked surprised, brows furrowed, but then relaxed as he turned to show me around the monastery. 10 minutes later, he took me back to the entrance. We've seen enough. You can go back now. Surprised, I asked, is that it? Billy, can you? He cut me off, pressing a tired brow. I've reached my time for worship. I can't stay with you. Disappointed, I turned to leave. But Billy spoke again. Next time, don't come alone. It's not good for just the 2 of us to be together. Those words lifted my spirits. I chalked his coldness up to being shy. So, when we met again, I dragged his twin Calvin, who'd just finished violin practice. On the way up the mountain, Calvin's mirror image face bore a distinctly annoyed look. You like him? Go yourself. I don't like him. Needing a favor, I quickly soothed him. What kind do you like? I'll find someone for you once we're down. Calvin paused, looked down at me, then strode ahead, pulling away. A breeze carried his voice back to me. Not telling you. I huffed and chased after him, the black-clad teenager with a violin case on his back. Fine then, keep it. Arriving at the monastery, Billy was already waiting. His face darkened seeing Calvin with me. Why'd you bring him along? Before I could reply, Calvin scoffed. Why can't I come? He jammed his hands into his pockets, brushing past Billy into the temple. This temple visit was just as unpleasant. When Calvin went to the bathroom, Billy spoke coldly. Next time, bring a girl. Confused, I asked, why? You sexist or something? After a moment, he looked down at me, his voice suddenly straightforward. Because I'm jealous. Is that reason enough? His directness left me stunned, struggling to react. Thinking my long-standing crush was answered, I couldn't wait to share it with my cousin, Sherry, and invited her next time. She agreed. This time, Billy's eyes lit up seeing us. Back then, I thought it was because I didn't bring a boy. Now I realize it was Sherry's presence melting his icy demeanor. And this truth didn't hit me until 3 years into the marriage. Standing at the study door, my eyes reddened involuntarily. My heart pricked with countless tiny stabbing pains. Billy, you never liked me, did you? Then why marry me? I sat numbly on the sofa for a long time. Tears eventually plopped onto the floor. At some point, Billy entered the living room. He stood tall in the shadow, his silent eyes particularly cold. He stared at me for a long moment before speaking with weariness. Done crying? If so, let's talk business. I didn't say a word, messily wiped my tears, and walked to him, tiptoeing to kiss him. He shoved me hard, and my waist hit the table corner, though it didn't hurt as much as seeing the disgust in his eyes. Didn't I tell you on our wedding day? I can't break my vows. What's gotten into you now? What if it was my cousin standing before you? Billy stood there, not moving, with his ears turning red. He was holding onto those white jade prayer beads, like they were his lifeline. I could tell he was feeling something, but he still pretended in front of me. Helen, don't make a scene. This has nothing to do with her, he said. I wasn't buying it. How does it not? You're in love with her, aren't you? He was caught off guard, a tiny spark of panic in his eyes. You heard. Without waiting for me to answer, he let out a breath. Okay then, let's be real here. I don't love you. My family wants kids. So just have them with Calvin. He looks just like me anyway. Shouldn't be that hard for you. Each word he spoke was like a knife, slicing away the feelings I had for him. His calm voice only told me how ridiculous my 15 years of love for him were. I wiped my tears quickly, only to find Calvin watching from the stairs. Since I married Billy, Calvin went abroad to study music. It's the first time we've seen each other in 3 years. He still looked the same, sharp eyes, full of that rebellious spirit. And me, just a mess. Billy followed my gaze, noticing his brother. He told him without a hint of emotion, I've told Helen, you can stay here tonight. Then he turned and walked away, not even sparing me a glance. Even with Calvin there, I lost it. Smashed the antiques in the living room to pieces. When I couldn't move anymore, I collapsed onto the floor, my face in my hands, crying my heart out. Calvin came down and crouched next to me. Want to break more? I'll buy new ones for you, he said. I shook my head, trying to smile through the pain. Sorry, we finally meet again, and you have to see this. Where are you staying tonight? I'll have the driver take you. He looked straight into my eyes, something unreadable in them. Didn't my brother say I should stay here? I froze, just staring at him. It took a while to find my voice. You're serious, Calvin? How could you agree to this? Why not? He asked, raising an eyebrow, impossibly serious. I backpedaled, startled. Of course not. I'm your sister-in-law. Suddenly, Calvin knelt down, leaning in close. And so what? Panicked, I got up to bolt, but he caught up, picking me up in a playful embrace. Calvin, have you lost it? Why are you freaking out so much? I was just joking, seeing you so upset. I paused. His little scare did distract me from crying. He went back to that nonchalant demeanor, and gently set me down on the couch. Take a break, I'll clean up, he said, pouring me a glass of water. I spotted Billy's tablet beside the couch. On impulse, I picked it up, entered Sherry's birthday. It unlocked. I opened Instagram. Sure enough, Sherry was his only pinned contact. They were chatting right now. Sherry, are you sure about this? What if Helen doesn't get pregnant? Billy, she has to. Sherry, sorry, I didn't expect my body couldn't handle a miscarriage. Billy, don't worry, it's my fault. Shouldn't have proposed to Helen just to spite you. Now my folks are so fond of her, I can't even divorce easily. Sherry, blame yourself. That night too, I told you to use protection, but you insisted we'd be fine. Now look, Billy, don't be mad, it's my fault. Once Helen has the baby, I'll switch to ours. Sherry, when are you marrying me? Billy, just wait a bit longer, okay? My parents won't let me divorce her for a few years. Sherry, fine, so annoying. Hurry over, I'm waiting to shower together. Reading the messages, I felt the blood drain from my face. No wonder Billy suddenly proposed 3 years ago. No wonder he wanted a kid. It was for Sherry. They had been together all along. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was Sherry. Hey Helen, just got back to town. Wanna hang out? I didn't reply. Instead, I looked over at Calvin cleaning up. Billy's words echoed in my mind. He looks just like me. Shouldn't be hard. The same. Not at all. Billy wouldn't clean up the mess. Calvin noticed my stare, coming over with raised eyebrows. What? Not feeling well? Also different. Billy wouldn't ask if I was okay. Tears I thought I'd stopped began to fall again. Calvin panicked, fumbling to wipe them away. Hey, why are you crying again? Tell you what, I'll trash my brother after I'm done cleaning. And to be honest, if it gets too much, you could find someone else. You've known other couples who barely stayed together for appearances, right? No reason to get hung up on my idiot brother. His kindness broke through the floodgates of longing and disappointment. I know, but it's just so hard. I loved him for 15 years. Why is he doing this? Calvin gently wiped my tears with his thumb. Let's go for a drive later. Clear your head, okay? He used to comfort me like this. He knows I love the feeling of a breeze on my cheeks. So whenever I'm upset, he'll take me for a ride on his scooter. I sit on the back and vent about all sorts of things. A lot of it is about Billy. I sniffed and shook my head. Maybe next time. I just bumped my side on the table, and it hurts. He froze for a moment, instinctively reaching out to check under my shirt, but stopped right at the edge of the fabric. Can I take a look? If it's bad, I'll take you to the hospital. He looked up at me, and his eyes were full of concern. I found myself nodding. He lifted the hem of my shirt. A bruise was clear as day in Calvin's eyes. He clenched his hand into a fist, as he stared at it for a long while. I felt my face heat up, and was about to pull my shirt down. But Calvin let go and got up, grabbing some ointment from the first aid kit. "Lie down." I watched him as he warmed up his palms. I hesitated, then laid down on the couch like he said. The floor-length window reflected Calvin's actions. He knelt beside the couch, leaning down to gently lift my shirt. A warm sensation spread across my left lower back the next moment. It was so hot it made my skin tighten, and I instinctively shifted to dodge it. Calvin looked up, his dark eyes meeting mine in the reflection. "Does it hurt?" His voice was raspy, making my ears burn for some reason. I quickly buried my face into my arms, mumbling, just be gentle." Calvin paused, then let out a soft laugh. I wanted to ask what was funny, but then I felt his touch again. This time, I stayed still, gripping the pillow under my head so hard my fingertips turned white. With my face buried, my senses seemed heightened. I felt my skin tense whenever he touched it, and then relax with his massage. I could hear his breathing, a bit heavier than usual. I could smell a faint soap scent clinging to him, subtle yet distinct. And every time he pressed down, his knee lightly brushed my thigh. The air felt like it was getting thinner. It was hard to breathe. Then suddenly, the phone rang. It was like being pulled out of water. I scrambled to answer. Billy was on the line. "Don't stay up too late with Calvin. We're having dinner at the family home tomorrow." I tried to calm myself. "Got it," I said, but the end of my voice went up unexpectedly. Calvin suddenly pressed harder on my back. "Oh, can you be gentler?" I glared at him. Calvin gave me an innocent look, batting his eyes. "Didn't mean to." "You, Helen," Billy's voice interrupted, with a hint of annoyance lurking beneath the surface. "What are you and my brother doing?" I quickly realized he misunderstood, but I wasn't in the mood to explain. Wasn't this exactly what Billy wanted? I chuckled, adding a flirty edge to my voice. "What we do doesn't concern you, does it?" As soon as I said that, Calvin leaned down, placing his chin almost on my shoulder. I froze, feeling his breath whisper past my ear. It tickled. "Don't worry, I'll take good care of Helen," he said, his fingers tickling my waist. I cursed and tried to swat his hand away, but accidentally scratched his arm. Calvin chuckled deep in his throat, resorting to scratching now. "You're wild." My face flushed with embarrassment. "Shut up, I don't want to hear it." Calvin smirked, nodding nonchalantly. "All right, I'm quieting down." But he didn't stop tickling me, leaving me at a loss for words. Billy stayed silent, listening to me and his brother's antics until he hung up at some point. The next morning, Calvin insisted on making me breakfast. He claimed he had the skills of a 5-star chef from living abroad. In the kitchen, he wore a pink apron, busy as ever, throwing goofy faces at me from the stove. Billy never did things like this for me. With Billy, it was just cold indifference. I never confused the two of them. They were entirely different. "Helen, come try this porridge I whipped up," Calvin called. I moved over, nursing my still sore waist. He lifted a spoonful of porridge to my lips. I started to reach for it, but then decided to just sip from the spoon instead. "It's good, but I think you forgot the salt." Calvin's expectant smile froze instantly. After a brief pause, he realized his cooking blunder. For a 5-star chef, this was quite the mishap. He awkwardly scratched his head. "Guess I forgot the salt." I was about to comfort him, but he suddenly made a silly heart gesture with his hands. It was so cheesy it left me speechless, yet it inexplicably made me feel warm. That's when Billy returned. He stood in the entryway, tall and well-built, white jade prayer beads dangling from his wrist, and his eyes carried a mysterious depth. His gaze fell on my hand supporting my back. 15 years of liking me, and now you're with someone else. Helen, really? His words came with a sarcastic edge, making me want to laugh. I couldn't help but retort, "You're not dead. Do I have to mourn for 3 years? Billy didn't reply, his lips pressed into a firm line. I knew he misunderstood my relationship with Calvin, but I wasn't about to clear it up for him. After all, wasn't this what he wanted? I giggled, massaging my waist dramatically. Besides, that's what you wanted, isn't it? And when I get pregnant, is the kid going to call you dad or uncle? Something in my words must have hit a nerve. Billy's face darkened. His eyes looked stormy as he faced me. Calvin wrapped his arm around my waist, his bright eyes curving into a mischievous smile. "Just call him dad," he said. Billy's lashes cast shadows under his eyes, hiding his emotions. "Do whatever you want," he said coldly, disappearing into his study. I patted Calvin's hand that was still resting on my waist. "The show's over. You can stop now." But instead, he suddenly tightened his grip, pulling me close. I tried to push him away with my hand on his chest, but it didn't work. The only thing accomplished was feeling his chest muscles. "I've been acting for you. Don't you owe me something?" He leaned in close. I instinctively held my breath and started stuttering. What do you want?" "I'll be your model. Paint a portrait of me." I froze, plastering on a dry smile. "How about you ask for something else? I haven't painted in a long time." I haven't painted since 5 years ago. 5 years ago, my graduation design was reported as a plagiarized work. It was a design I worked so hard on, my brainchild. But somehow, someone had released a design almost identical to mine just 2 weeks earlier. I had no way to defend myself. I never got my diploma and faced public ridicule in school. I became a laughingstock in the industry and never picked up a paintbrush again. Well, except once. On Sherry's 25th birthday, she insisted on being my model, begging me to make her look nice, and saying it was just to honor our friendship. I kept refusing. Then she pouted and said, "Helen, am I not like a sister to you?" I was speechless. Billy, who was quietly folding paper cranes next to me, suddenly looked up, and in his usual indifferent tone said, "It's just a painting. What are you refusing for?" I pressed my lips together and finally agreed, but with one condition: don't post it online. Who would have thought that the very night, after I finished the painting, I'd end up trending online. Sherry posted the artwork on Facebook with the caption, "Thank you, Helen, for the birthday gift. I love it." Even after hiding so long, I was dragged back into the public eye by her. People immediately dug into my past, calling me a plagiarist and advising Sherry to stay away from me. "Sorry, Helen, your painting is too pretty. I just couldn't help posting it on Facebook," Sherry said, swinging our joined hands apologetically. I looked down at our intertwined hands, and for the first time, spoke harshly to her. "I'm not in a good mood now. Can you leave me alone?" Sherry was stunned. I turned and went home, only to be scolded harshly by my dad and stepmom the moment I entered the door. "Why do you have to show off? So what if you can paint? If I had known you'd embarrass us like this, I would have broken your hand." "Helen, your dad barely managed to cover up your plagiarism scandal then, and now you're stirring things up again. Do you think we have money to burn?" Every word felt like a blow to my back, slowly bending my prideful and lively spirit. That's probably when I became thoroughly quiet. When Billy saw me again, even he was surprised enough to raise an eyebrow. "You've changed a lot," I chuckled. "I can't bring shame to my family like before." Over time, because of family connections, Sherry and I made up, but things never went back to how they once were. Now, Calvin brought up painting again, and I instinctively avoided it. He looked at me seriously, his dark eyes seemed to hold the stars. "Helen, you said you wanted to be a great artist." I blinked away the tears. "But I'm labeled a plagiarist." "I don't believe you plagiarized. The guy who accused you vanished afterward, but someone transferred 30 million to him. I don't think it's a coincidence." "Helen, you did nothing wrong. I found his address last week. Should we pay him a visit?" Listening to the conviction in his voice, I couldn't hold back my tears. The grievance of 5 years burst forth. It turns out, someone believed in me. In the end, I promised Calvin to make him a painting. "But not now," he said. "On the day your name is cleared, paint me first." We had lunch at the old house. Billy's mom brought up wanting a grandchild again. My heart skipped, and I instinctively glanced at Calvin playing chess with his dad nearby. He sat upright at the chessboard, different from his usual laid-back manner. His long fingers held a smooth black piece, rubbing it gently. For some reason, I remembered how his calloused finger had brushed my waist the night before. Suddenly, he looked my way, raising an eyebrow slightly. Snapping back to reality, embarrassed, I looked around to avoid his gaze. I accidentally locked eyes with Billy. Unlike before, instead of feeling overjoyed, I frowned and looked away. He immediately tightened his grip on his beads. After lunch, Calvin came home with us, but was blocked at the door by Billy. "Your house isn't here." Calvin nonchalantly pushed past and stood next to me, grinning innocently. "I know, but I have to accompany my sister-in-law. You said it yourself yesterday. You want her to have a baby with me." Billy was silent, just staring at me. I sweetly hooked my arm through Calvin's, waving at Billy. "Go out and have fun. Don't bother us." 2 seconds later, Billy left, slamming the door hard. The noise left me stunned. Was he angry? But wasn't this what he wanted? When the days faded, Calvin called me over to book tickets to go abroad. We planned to meet the guy, Nick, who accused me of plagiarism. Upon arrival, we learned Nick had a car accident a few days earlier and didn't survive. I stood at the hospital entrance for a long time, the foreign cold wind biting my face. Then, Calvin turned sideways to shelter me from the wind. "It's okay. There must be other ways." I nodded, letting the wind mess up my long hair. As my vision blurred, I felt briefly separated from the world, until a sir broke the silence. Calvin and I turned and saw a middle-aged woman standing not too far away. It was Nick's wife. I silently pulled up my mask. She jogged over and bowed to Calvin, nervously speaking in a rush, I thought you wouldn't come since you didn't answer my calls. You're a lifesaver to us. Nick wanted to see you one last time, but didn't manage to. Calvin stood there, slightly bewildered, but he quickly snapped out of it. His gaze turned cold and distant, and his stance was a bit less relaxed. For a moment, I almost called out Billy's name. He had learned so well. Nick's wife paused, glanced cautiously at Calvin, and said, after Nick passed, he didn't leave much money. It's tough for me and the kids here in a foreign land. Could you perhaps throw in another 30 million to help us out? Calvin lowered his gaze, looked at her coldly, not saying a word, but the pressure was palpable. She rubbed her hands anxiously. You don't have to help me, but some things Nick left might end up with your wife Helen. It won't look good when that happens. Hearing my name, I was stunned, my heart growing cold inch by inch. Billy, what have you been up to behind my back? Money isn't the problem. Calvin's voice suddenly dropped, tinged with a hint of displeasure. But this is the last time. Give me the stuff, and I'll destroy it myself. If you dare keep a backup, I'll make sure you join Nick. Of course, but I want to see the money first. Calvin narrowed his eyes and snorted coldly. Don't lecture me. I don't like killing. Seemingly reminded of the power behind the Pei family, Nick's wife hesitated for a moment, but eventually backed down. Fine, I'll give it to you now, but you must keep your word. After a few seconds of hesitation, she pulled out a USB stick. Calvin connected the USB to his phone and checked the files inside. They were phone recordings and chat logs. Suddenly, Nick's wife exclaimed, "How come you're not wearing the prayer beads today?" Calvin's fingers paused, then without lifting his gaze, he simply and plainly said 4 words. It's cold, hands freeze. Tomorrow, 30 million will be in your account. Hide well overseas. Leaving those words behind, Calvin quickly turned and left, and I hurried after him. Hearing that, Nick's wife had her mind set on the money, any doubts gone. She even warmly showed us out. On the way back to the hotel, I listened to the recordings on the USB. It had Billy saying to Nick, 30 million, stop bothering Sherry, or I won't hesitate to kill. There was Sherry talking to Nick. I sent you Helen's drafts. Make some edits and get them out quickly. Make sure it becomes a big deal. I sat on the bed, spacing out. The recordings I just heard echoed in my ears, my chest heavy. Sherry, why did you do this? Billy, what did I ever do to you? Until Calvin's constant knocking brought me out of my sad thoughts. I opened the door. He stood there, looking worried, and only after making sure I was okay did he breathe a small sigh of relief. I thought you might be hiding in your room crying. I blinked my dry eyes, forced a bitter smile, and didn't say anything. Cry? I'm too upset, so much that I can't cry. Don't worry, I'm fine. Go get some sleep, we have a flight to catch tomorrow. Calvin looked at me for a moment longer before stepping back, pointing behind him. Am I really going back? I was amused. Go on, good night. He finally calmed down, turned, and left. In the next moment, though, I suddenly grabbed his sleeve. Thank you. He didn't turn back. No need to thank me. Protecting my sister is the right thing to do. The next day, just back home, I opened the door to hear a woman's giggles inside. It was Sherry. She was straddling Billy, her cheeks lightly flushed. Seeing me, she slowly got off Billy and greeted me. Helen, you're back. At the same time, a string of jade beads fell from her skirt. They shimmered with a soft light. Those were my gift to Billy for his 18th birthday. Now, they were being disrespected like this. I can't imagine how heartbroken the old me would be. But luckily, I don't care that much now. 3 years since I last saw her. Sherry still ran over and shook my arm like before. Why don't you ever reply to my messages? I was worried, so I came to see you, and just happened to run into Billy. So we hung out for a bit. Just happened to run into him. They've clearly reached this point and they are still pretending. I pulled my arm back, expressionless, and unceremoniously shoved her aside. With some force, she fell straight to the ground. Sherry, Billy rushed over, helping Sherry up, and harshly scolded me. Helen, what's gotten into you? Apologized to Sherry. I promptly flipped him off. Not happening. It was my first time standing up to him like this. Billy's eyes landed on me, with a hint of scrutiny. Suddenly, he sneered, you're throwing a tantrum. Helen, there's no need. You know I don't love you. All these little schemes of yours just annoy me more. I stared at his face, feeling a bit dazed. I've liked Billy for 15 years. Whether it was his lively, sunny self when we were young or his calm, quiet demeanor during our marriage, he'd never smiled at me once. In front of me, he's like a frozen lake. No matter how I treat it, there isn't so much as a ripple. This is the first time he smiled in front of me, but it was full of mockery, mocking the me that changed herself for him all these years. I sighed, eventually saying to Billy calmly and with composure, "You're overthinking it. You're not worth my tantrums anymore. Billy, let's get a divorce." His cold and disdainful eyes turned into a blank stare. Seems he didn't expect me to give him up. Helen, he narrowed his eyes, pressing his lips into a line. "That joke's not funny." I shook my head. "I'm not joking. You like my cousin, right? After we divorce, you can marry her. I'll call you cousin-in-law then." Billy fixed his gaze on me, seemingly trying to find some trace of insincerity. I just watched him quietly. "What, don't you want to marry her?" Sherry suddenly looked up at him. Billy paused, then grabbed Sherry's hand, interlocking their fingers, and looked straight at me. "You don't have to try to come between us, Helen. We can divorce. But you have to tell my parents that you fell out of love. I don't want to have a bad impression in their minds. Plus, Sherry's making a comeback in the entertainment industry, and this can't tarnish her image." Silence filled the room. For the first time, I wanted to describe the man I once held so dear as shameless. He knows full well how much his parents adore me as their daughter-in-law, and despite being at fault, he wants me to take the blame for everything. How shameless. Just then, beside me, Calvin muttered under his breath, "Even divorcing is a hassle. Bad impression. If you messed up, own it. Your parents have more than one son." He just went ahead and took out his phone, snapped a pic of Billy and Sherry holding hands, and sent it to the family group chat. Billy rushed to stop him, but he was too late. The photo went out, along with Calvin's laid-back voice message. "My brother cheated, brought the mistress home, and wants to divorce Helen." The four of us were called back to the family home. As soon as we got in, Billy's dad's stern voice echoed, "Billy, get on your knees." Billy didn't budge. He just stood there, confident. "I did nothing wrong. I just found someone I truly love." The words had barely left his mouth when his dad's belt whipped across his back. "Then why'd you marry Helen in the first place? She's a good woman, and you're messing around." Seeing Billy getting hit, Sherry jumped in. "Uncle, please stop. What if you hurt him? Your grandson would be heartbroken." "Grandson?" Sherry touched her stomach. "I'm pregnant with Billy's child." They were stunned for a moment, exchanged glances, then looked back at silent me. Finally, Billy's mom gritted her teeth and coldly said, "Then get rid of it. We don't accept illegitimate children. I'll only recognize a grandchild from Helen." "Mom, I don't like her. If you want her child, then I can't help you. You ungrateful kid." In the chaos, I calmly spoke up, "Billy, let's get a divorce. If I ever marry again, or have kids, I'll recognize you as their godmother." They tried to persuade me, but my mind was set. I had to get divorced. With their reluctant looks, Billy and I got our divorce papers. That afternoon, Sherry couldn't wait to announce on Facebook, "After all this time, it's still you," she wrote, with a picture of them holding hands. Maybe to promote Sherry's comeback, even non-Facebook user Billy made an account to comment, "Hello, my wife." The two of them instantly became a trending topic. Lovebirds, people said, but there were some dissenting voices too. Am I the only one who remembers Billy was married? Nope, they're divorced now. And the other one was disgraceful Helen, so they should have split. It was their announcement. Yet I got pulled into the mess and was dragged through the mud. Sherry even messaged me, "Helen, thanks for giving Billy back. When we get married, would you be my bridesmaid?" Ridiculous, I thought, and sent her a voice clip I'd gotten from Nick's wife. "Listen to this. Still want me as your bridesmaid? Sorry, Helen, I didn't mean to frame you." Not long ago she was flaunting over text, yet now Sherry was clutching my leg, begging, "I'm asking you, please. I apologize. Can you delete those recordings, please?" Billy stood there, face stern, and shouted at me, "Helen, that's enough." Sherry apologized. "What more do you want?" First, I can choose not to accept her apology. Second, you can't escape either. I released the recording of Billy and Nick. The cold look on his face crumbled into panic. He stepped forward, trying to grab my hand, but I slapped him hard. It hurt my hand. He turned away awkwardly but eventually looked down and pleaded, "Please, let Sherry go." I laughed out of anger. Why didn't she let me go then? Why did she keep plotting against me? Do I owe her something? And you, fighting with her, why did you have to sacrifice my marriage? Billy hung his head, pride gone, murmuring sorry over and over. I couldn't be bothered with them anymore. I exposed everything. Sherry's high-profile comeback crashed into a scandal. She became an outcast and lashed out at me. "Helen, you're just as cheap as your mom. She ruined my mom, you ruined me, we have the worst luck with you too. And let me tell you, I never really liked Billy. I just wanted to take your man. Just like your mom pursued my dad." That's when I realized why she resented me. It was because her mom, my aunt, and my mom once loved the same man. My aunt manipulated him into marrying her, but the marriage was unhappy. My uncle eventually committed suicide. He left a drawer full of sketchbooks, filled with drawings of my mom. When my dad found out, he and my mom split, and he couldn't stand me, the art-loving kid. Later, my mom drowned herself out of grief. Both families shattered, but I thought Sherry and I were unaffected. Turns out, she never forgot. Doesn't matter. She won't get away with it now. I'm not done with her. Once my name was cleared, I got my diploma back. The first painting I made was promised to Calvin. By the time I finished, it was evening. The golden glow of the setting sun spilled onto Calvin's face. "How about I take you for a ride?" he said. This time, I didn't refuse. I sat on the back of his bike, soaked in the summer breeze, carrying the light scent of his laundry detergent, just like countless times before. But this time, I wasn't venting to him through tears. Instead, he asked, "Why did you even like my brother back then?" I paused, thought about it. I really didn't know why I fell for him. All I knew was that once I realized I liked him, I was already lost in the rare moments he spent with me. If I had to find a reason, maybe it was because he was a top student. At first, it was admiration, and then it turned into affection. Calvin went quiet. He wasn't fond of studying at first. "I've got good grades now. Maybe you can try liking me." I looked up, watching his ears and neck turn red. "I used to be your sister-in-law, you know. So, isn't that done?" I stayed silent, memories of our interactions racing through my mind. Finally, I had my answer. "He deserved it. But, it's too fast. I just got divorced." Calvin instantly got what I meant. "Alright, then I'll wait for you. I'm reserving a spot as your second husband." When I turned 30, I decided to remarry. With Calvin, because of a brief lapse in attention, I got pregnant. When he took me to place the pregnancy test on the table and said he wanted to get engaged, his parents were over the moon. Billy, who'd been dumped by Sherry, stood nearby, staring at me intently. Eventually, he seized the chance to corner me in an upstairs room. He pulled out the birthday gift I once gave him. "Helen, I've cleaned it up." I frowned, eyes full of disgust. "It's filthy. Keep that, and yourself, away from me." Billy was stunned for a moment. His eyes gradually reddened. His gaze fell on my belly. "You're really pregnant?" I chuckled. "Yeah, as you wished. Just that you missed the chance to swap Sherry's kid with me." He opened his mouth, but couldn't say a thing. He just asked lamely and unwillingly, "Did you really fall for my brother?" I didn't answer, just looked at him like he was an idiot. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door behind me. Calvin's laid-back voice came through. "Fiancé, open up. I'm here to pick you up." I gave Billy a polite smile, turned, opened the door, and jumped into Calvin's arms. He held me tight and then looked at the face in the room, identical to his own, grinning triumphantly. "Thanks for messing up, big bro, so I could sneak in. I'll save you a seat at the main table at the wedding." I pressed a kiss on Calvin's lips, then turned to look at the regretful Billy. I flipped him the bird with both hands. "Bro, make sure you come to the wedding, okay? Oh, and the kid will call you uncle."